put history in context of today's life because just given the raw history alone, as you said last week, there's so many words that people may not understand, and I get it. So we're gonna try to put history in context of today's life, DJ Roy. So let's go, sir. So the pioneers, DJ Roy, of humanity, the pioneers of humanity. That's what probably now all archaeologists and paleoanthropologists say that. So, and all probably good, fair-minded historians, I think they all say it worldwide as well. So the pioneers of humanity and the founders of very early civilization in our history, and how events of genocide severed us from this knowledge of our ancestors, from our sacred divine spirituality and God. Yes, a lot was severed because it's not in the history books, and the powers that be, the elites, they're the ones who write history. And all it takes is a few generations for people, any people, to completely forget their history. So let's recap timeline of early human civilizations at Adam's calendar and in southern Africa and at Naphtali in Nubia, Sudan, and how our ancestors passed that same knowledge to Kush and Egypt, and how that knowledge still exists today, used around the world. So the cradle of humanity, just briefly, just so you all, get very educated in this history, and especially the foundation, the cradle of humanity in the Tugen Hills in Kenya, 7 million years ago. The human remains were found there 7 million years before the Bible. Yes, 7 million years before the Bible. And before Jesus Christ, too. 7 million years before Jesus. 7 million years before Islam, Judaism, Hinduism. And as for Lucy, whose remains were discovered in Ethiopia 3.2 million years ago before the Bible. And for Homo habilis and Homo erectus, found in the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, 1.9 and 1.2 million years ago, respectively, before the Bible, before Jesus, before Islam, before Judaism, before Hinduism. And these are the main religions on planet Earth today. So, over 7 million years ago, before Noah declares in Genesis 9 that Africans of Ham should be slaves and servants of Shem and Japhet, who are Noah's other sons, those of you who know the Bible. That's how long ago these people have lived, to be declared 7 million years later to be the slaves and the servants of other people. The pioneers of humanity, the pioneers of humanity were declared to be slaves of people who came after. How shameful, I think. So these Africans, the old race, the old wise men and wise women, wagered themselves from brutal isolation to organic civilized life that we call civilization today. They started it. So civilization did not just happen. It was a sacred divine gift passed to us, all of us, from our ancestors, from Adam's calendar, Naphtali, Adam's calendar about 70,000 years ago, Naphtali about 10,000 years ago, and other places as well that probably existed before Naphtali, like Mali and Chad, where a lot of knowledge was passed from those places as well to Kemet and Kush. To Kemet and Kush. So all this knowledge existed before Kemet and even before the Kushites who created Kemet. That's how far this knowledge goes back. And then recapping a little further, the cradle of God worship and sacred divine spirituality, the early beginnings can be seen at Adam's calendar and then at Naphtali. And again, 70,000 years before the Bible, God worship and spirituality existed on earth. So it wasn't new, as a lot of us would be led to think. And this is 70,000 years before Jesus and Christianity, 70,000 years before Islam, Judaism, and Hinduism. That's what the records show. So why is this important, folks? Sacred spirituality. It is important because it's the origin of morality and ethical values. And by the way, a lot of us read Plato, or the Plato Republic, and we're talking about Plato came maybe 70,000 years later as well. Not maybe, 70,000 years later as well. So this morality from spirituality existed so over 70,000 years ago. So morality and ethical values are found in the sacred spirituality and God worship at Adam's calendar and at Naphtali, just so you all know. Morality and ethics were finely defined at Custul, where divine kingship and divine priesthood were first discovered as well. As expressed in the sacred texts of the Ma'at, you all should read the Ma'at, please. Google it and read it. It reads like the Ten Commandments. So please, all of you, Google the Ma'at and read it, as well as other sacred Medinetta texts of the Kushite Kemites. These sacred texts and the Medinetta texts before them speak of the land of Pund, or the land of Tanataru, which means the Holy Land or the land of God. And all this took place as well before the Bible. All these texts existed before the Bible, just so you all know. You should research it. Don't take my word for it. And you have never heard of this before because it is not mentioned in the history books. Yes, the land of God, or the Holy Land, is called Tanataru or Tanejar. And all of this, all this knowledge existed in one small strip of land from Kenya, Tanzania to Kush in Egypt, or Kush in Kemet. All this knowledge, not just the creative early humans in the Tugan Hills of Kenya, but God worship, sacred spirituality. So God worship and sacred spirituality with heaven up there in the Orion constellation or beyond the Orion constellation. We don't know exactly what the people, our ancestors at Adam's calendar and Naphtali, we know they studied the Orion constellation, but we know they call up their heaven like the later Kushites and Kemites did. But it could be beyond the Orion constellation, but it's up there in heaven. And along the African eastern sky to the southern sky, you find the Sirius star, the brightest star in the night sky, up there in heaven. And then if you go a little south to west, you find the Milky Way galaxies, saying that the small little belt in the northern hemisphere, they call up there in heaven. But what is morality and ethics, people? Morality and ethics are the values underlying our relationship with God and nature, everything in nature. all the things of the earth, living and non-living, everything in nature and the universe. So then morality and ethics are the offsprings of cultural heritage, not just of divine spirituality and God worship, but cultural heritage is practice. That's what make a society civilized. That's what make those early ancestors civilized. They created it, and they live by those rules. It is the breach of morality and ethics why hate and wars now fill the world, people. Sacred divine morality and ethics ended when they invaded and destroyed Kemet and Kush. I think that's when it ended. I am not able to find any evidence to the contrary. 2,500 years ago. That's when it ended. And then a man came along named Jesus Christ who tried to resurrect it. Yes, Jesus tried to resurrect morality and ethics with his words of forgiveness. But the world rejected him, and then they murdered him. Those of you who believe in Jesus and believe in the New Testament. So Jerusalem is supposed to be the place of Jesus' sacred love, the sacred representation of Jesus' love. But the city of love and peace is now a city filled with frequent violence, hate, wars, and death. As you all know, just read the newspapers, you'll see that. City of love, death and destruction. So those who wield power claim their violent acts are sanctioned by their righteous God. Really. They also say the genocides in Deuteronomy 20, verse 16 to 18, 1 Samuel 15, 2 to 3, Joshua 6:21. They said these genocides that are detailed in this section of the Bible are also sanctioned by their righteous God as well. And then when we come back, DJ Roy, we're gonna wrap it up with the cradle of astronomy and how it affects all of us today and how it still lives on from Adam's calendar 70,000 years ago to Naphtali 10,000 years ago to ancient Kush and Egypt, or Kemet and Kush. We're going to show you how all this is tied together. It's not just the early humans, it's not just spirituality and God worship, but also how astronomy is tied to geometry, the invention of mathematics. We're going to tie it all up, DJ Roy, when we come back, sir.
All right, people. Again, I urge you to download the New Species app. We're actually live on the app as we speak. Go to your Google Play Store or go to your Apple Store and download the app today. Get on your starter packages and get on them immediately. And by doing so, you live longer, healthier, and more fulfilled.
Civilization did not begin 3,000 years ago, my friends. Civilization began about 75,000 years ago by the early Alkebulians or the early Africans or the very early Kushites in southern Africa. Civilization did not begin with the ancient Greeks. Civilization did not begin with the ancient Romans. Civilization began with the early Kushites who migrated from southern Africa via the Khoisans or the Khoikhoi and the Bantu to northern Africa. Now, the Blambos Caves in southern Alkebulan have some of the most extraordinary pieces of arts that were made over 70,000 years ago. But we're not here to talk about the Blambos Caves. We're here to talk about Adam's calendar in southern Alkebulan. The Adam's calendar was built at least 75,000 years ago. Some believe that it was built as early as 130,000 years ago. But let's stick with 75,000 years ago. The early Kushites who built the Adam's calendar, they used granite, dolomite, and hornfel. These are special stones that have certain electromagnetic components. And this is very critical to what the early Kushites were trying to accomplish or had accomplished. Those stones were protruding from the ground, but those stones, because they're electromagnetic in nature, because of their components, because of their chemistry, those stones were connected with the magnetic energy or the magnetic force or the electromagnetic force from the core of the earth, as well as the other minerals that carry that force from the core of the earth to the surface of the earth, where these dolomites and granite, they also created a force field that was also connecting with the Orion constellation and likely other galaxies. We don't know the full extent of what the early Kushites were doing over 75,000 years ago, but we know this. Those megaliths, they are perfectly aligned with the brightest stars in the Orion constellation. And those megaliths, they have electromagnetic forces connecting into the earth and connecting above the earth with other electromagnetic forces, which could be the photon physics, or it could be other electromagnetic forces related to gravity. Now, we're going to talk about that because it is very important to understand what these early human ancestors accomplished and how this knowledge migrated to the Kushites in northern Africa, as well as to the Egyptians, who were Kushites. Let's talk about Adam's calendar and just think for a moment about the degree of knowledge that would be required to accomplish what I just said 75,000 years ago. Imagine the knowledge, exceptional inventions in spherical trigonometry, in geometry, and other mathematical forms that would be required 75,000 years ago, at least, to align these electromagnetic megaliths with the Orion constellation perfectly. Perfect alignment. Imagine. Now, this Adam's calendar can today be used as a real calendar to predict rainstorms, to tell the season of the year, to tell the time of the year by month, week, day, and even the precise time any given day. Yes, the Adam's calendar circle can do that today, as it had done over 75,000 years ago. Now, again, Imagine the knowledge in particle physics, wave frequency physics, or electricity and magnetism, quantum physics, other multivariable calculus, other mathematical methods in physics, statistics. We don't know that the Kushites were calling this quantum physics or quantum mechanics or electromagnetic force 75,000 years ago. But we know that what they have accomplished. These modern names, quantum mechanics, quantum physics, wave frequencies, photon physics. We know that all these names that we use today in physics and chemistry could easily have been used 75,000 years ago. Now, we will talk about this a whole lot more, Adam's calendar, and the astronomical signs, or the signs in astronomy and astrology that they developed 75,000 years ago. We will talk about that because this also has everything to do with Kushite spirituality. Let's go further north up to Naphtali. While Adam's calendar was built over 75,000 years ago and is perfectly aligned with the Orion constellation that is over 1,300 light years away from here, from Earth, over 1,300 light years away from here. Now, in each light year is 6 trillion years. 6 trillion years in one light year. The Orion constellation is about 1,300 light years away from Earth. Now, let's go up to Naphtali. Naphtali is also aligned, at least when it was built, with the brightest stars in the Orion constellation. Naphtali has megalith as well, which need to be examined more by scientists. But Naphtali, megalith, are aligned, or at least when it was built, with the brightest stars in the Orion constellation, just as Adam's circle, or Adam's calendar. Now, let's move further north. Egypt. The 3 pyramids at Giza are also aligned with the Orion constellation, or at least the brightest stars in the Orion constellation. Now, the 3 pyramids at Giza, Naphtali, Adam's circle, all have the same astronomical concepts in common. They're aligned with the brightest stars in the Orion constellation. The Great Sphinx, which is aligned with the 3 pyramids at Giza, are also aligned toward the constellation of the Orion belt. Why are all of these monuments invented by the Alkebulians or Africans? Why are they so important? They're important, friends, because it shows that civilization not only began over 75,000 years ago, but it shows that the knowledge of the Kushites, or the Kushite Egyptians, and the knowledge that they brought to Kerma, the knowledge that they brought to Napata, was the knowledge they used to construct the holy sacred city of Napata. The holy sacred city of Napata that was destroyed. It was completely razed, completely destroyed. Now, what we don't know is the knowledge that was destroyed there. The knowledge in astronomy, astrology, in earth science, knowledge of physics, knowledge of chemistry, knowledge of architecture, and probably most importantly, knowledge of
how the Kushites were able to survive global climate change that is now affecting us today. Imagine if we had that knowledge today. Imagine if that knowledge was not destroyed. So this is something for all of us to think about, all humans to think about, and think about in the sense that when we don't all stand together, we stand disintegrated. But let's go back to the Kushites. We're going to talk about Kushite spirituality. We're going to talk about what happened at Adam's calendar, what happens at Naphtali, what happens at the three pyramids at Giza, and then we're going to talk about the holy sacred city of Napata and how we are a weaker people today. All humans are weaker because of its destruction and what was destroyed there. All that knowledge and information that could probably help us today to survive global climate change that we still can't seem to figure out.
But I also want to make sure that you're here next year to hear the history. So I emphasize on make sure not depending on the formula. Make sure not taking a new species. Make sure not detox. Make sure not drinking the water. Make sure not getting exercise. And as Aston gives you food for the brain, he also gives you food for the rest of the body too. So let's get some brain food now, Aston. Welcome back, my friend.
Yes, sir. It's brain food. It's spiritual food. It's mental food. And yes, new species formulas provide the physical food. And when everybody has the good physical food, DJ Roy, and then the good mental and spiritual health, that's
Yeah.
how the body is harmonized, and that's how the body is powerful. That's how the mind is powerful. So people,
Right.
we have to do this. We have to do history. I'm happy that a lot of you love it or seem to love it, and spread the word. So DJ Roy, people have asked me why is astronomy so important? Why the discoveries in astronomy so important by our early ancestors, our early civilizations? I call them the old race, or the wise men, the wise men and wise women.
Right.
Why is astronomy, people? Astronomy, people, is everything. As I mentioned before, that's what our ancestors used to tie to sacred spirituality and God worship. And now I'm going to give you another side of it that is so critical. It's so critical. Unfortunately, it's not in the history books. Don't know why they don't put it there, but hopefully someday it will be there. But astronomy, people, the study of the stars, the study of the galaxies, the study of heaven up there in heaven, as our ancestors call it. Astronomy led our ancestors to the discovery, DJ Roy, of sacred geometry. Sacred geometry. What is sacred geometry. I've used the word sacred, I've used the word divine.
Right.
Well, this is a part of the meaning, people. Sacred geometry meaning an understanding and the creating of mathematics or mathematical equations to measure the shapes in nature. If you all look around you, I don't care whether you're indoors or you're outdoors, they're all sorts of circular shapes, triangular shapes, rectangular shapes. There are all sorts of shapes around you. And our ancestors saw that and wanted to have measurements. And this knowledge of sacred geometry led the Africans to invent geometry itself and mathematics. So there's a root for everything, people. Nothing was picked from the sky.
Right.
Everything is related back to nature and the universe. And that's what you all should understand. And once our ancestors were able to invent geometry and mathematics, they developed architecture at Naphtha that we talked about so much, evidenced by the stone buildings found there. So some of the first stone buildings on planet Earth were found at Naphtha that was 10,000 years ago, and people lived in them. So people were not living in, as a lot of you were led to believe in thatch huts, that could be blown down by a simple 20 miles per hour wind. The people were living in stone buildings, stone houses, and they were found 10,000 years ago at Naphtha. And this is 5,000 years before Kush and Egypt or Kemet people. 5,000 years before the dynasties of Kush and Kemet. 5,000 years before. So that's how old this knowledge is. So the knowledge to build houses and buildings led the old race to develop engineering, Detroit, and they dug wells for water year round during the inhospitable climate changes that took place during that time. And you can go back and do the research. You'll see how violent and torrid the climate change was, and these people survived it. They survived it because, they were smart. So the invention of geometry and mathematics, architecture and engineering, guess what, people? That's what got passed to the Kushites and the Kemites, enabling them to build the pyramids that you can see now, to build obelisks, to build temples and other monuments. Right, people? Yes, that's where that knowledge came from. They didn't come up out of nowhere in Kush in Egypt. It came from these early ancestors. And then Nimrod in the Bible, the son of Cush, wanted to build the ultimate Tower of Babel, probably bigger and taller than the pyramids, but he was murdered before he could do so. So you see, people, years of evolving knowledge by the intellectual giants of the old race, the wise men like Usur and Heru, who were renamed Osiris and Horus, and all the wise women, Iset and Mayat. So this is where all that knowledge came from, people. So the three cradles of humanity, spirituality, astronomy, and God worship happen on the one strip of land from Kenya, Tanzania to Ethiopia and Kush and Kemet. So see the sacred texts. People go read the metadata texts. They're available online. The translation may not be completely accurate, but you can find them online. And Adam's calendar circle of the megaliths are aligned with the stars in the Orion constellation, keeping in mind again that the Adam's calendar circle was over 70,000 years old. 70,000 years old, aligned with the stars in the Orion constellation. And then Naphtha, 10,000 years ago. Those two are aligned with the Orion constellation stars. And then here came the pyramids about 5,000 years ago, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. The pyramids at Kernetta, renamed Giza, also aligned with the Orion stars in the Orion constellation. So people, the message you take away from this is no, Adam's calendar was not built by aliens. And no, Naphtha and the pyramids were not built by aliens. as some historians once claimed, these Africans were no aliens. They were some very smart people. They were, in my mind, the intellectual giants of the past. And Adam's calendar is not in the history books. Some cultures using this knowledge the last 1,000 years have taken credit for these discoveries. But don't be put off by what you see on the internet or you see in social media. A lot of that information was just recycled, this old knowledge. So the more modern historians who have more knowledge, especially in archaeology and paleoanthropology, they have the more recent knowledge, but they for some reason it's still not appearing in the history books. But don't be put off by what you see online. DJ Roy, when we come back next week at Monday School, I'm going to plug Monday School. We're going to talk about nationalism. We're going to talk about nationalism. We're going to talk about racism. We're going to talk about the roots of it, people. We're going to talk about the origin of it, because everybody needs to understand what racism and nationalism really are and the foundations of them. And I think when you all get a better understanding of these two, divisive elements in the universe and on Earth today, I think you're gonna have a better understanding how to resist it, how to fight it, how to look past it, and how to keep, rebuilding your lives, our lives, and try to make this world a better place, Detroit. So next week, people, tune in. We're going to talk about nationalism and racism, those two divisive elements in society today. And we're going to give you the roots of it, how it goes so far back that a lot of you may not even understand. So that's what we're going to talk about on Monday School next week, DJ Roy.
All right, so that's the heads up. Again, everyone, please download the app. You might be catching us now on 93.5 FM. We don't know when the plug are going to pull. All right, plug can pull at a time. So make sure you download that New Species app. Make sure you download that iReJam app and stay connected. Okay, any questions? Of course, you can call New Species Hotline, especially when it comes to your formulas and history. The number is 888-548-3150, 888-548-3150. And that's the number you should be dialing for all your information about New Species. Aston, I just want to touch on one of the testimonies we had on Saturday, I should say. Again, when people take time out to come on the air and talk about what New Species has done for them, first and foremost, let me say hats off for taking the products, but also hats off for sharing your story. We know that we got hundreds of thousands of people that, keep it private, and that's what we do if that's what you want. But when you come on air and tell your story, Aston, it's truly a beautiful thing. Aston?
I totally agree, sir. And I encourage, or as we do all this physical health using New Species and mental, spiritual health, we do Monday School history and our ancestors and understanding the past because it's not written in the history books. I strongly encourage all of you who have taken New Species and you get results, you should call me up or call up New Species and go in and give your live testimonies. That's what you should. I'm giving you my live testimonies. That's what Monday School is. I'm giving you, I am embarrassed to sit here, DJ Roy, and talk about some of these things in Monday School because, the human race should be past this. By thousands of years should be past this. But guess what? We are not. And I have to sit here feeling embarrassed and talk about these things, about genocides and murders and all these things. Those of you who follow the news have heard about the two men who were brutalized in Mississippi, earlier this year by 6, police officers. They brutalized him. And now, and then they lied about it, and now it's in the New York Times that they're all gonna confess this week that they did everything that they were accused of doing by these two black men. So, you're talking about history. You're talking about the Bible. You're talking about Genesis 9, where Noah declared that we should be, slaves and servants. And this is black men. That's where it came from. A lot of the brutality is based in Christianity and other religions. So what we face today, Detroit, I am ashamed to sit here and say what I say, but it's real, and it's the lives that we all live. And those of you who have testimonies, you should come up and talk about it. Come on the radio and talk about it, and don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, because you're probably going to help one person. You're probably going to save one life. And most importantly, it is the beginning, DJ Roy, of the unification. We need to unify so we can help one another.
Indeed, indeed. So people, make sure you join us each and every Monday. Please share your stories and spread the word about new species, raw, natural, organic. Again, the eighth wonder of the world. I believe everyone should have the detox in their house. Yeah, that's like when you go buy sugar, when you're supposed to have the detox. Because guess what? The sugar not good for you, but the detox good for you. You understand? So every household should have that detox in it. Call, get on your starter packages today. 888-548-3150. 888-548-3150. So, my friend, anything else to add?
Well, we are going to continue this later, DJ Roy. We have so much work to do, DJ Roy. Especially before the plug is pulled, as you call it.
Yeah, man. Oh, my God.
We have a lot of work to do, so let's try to get as much done as we can, sir. Thank you very much.
Indeed, indeed. I'll speak to you later, Aston.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now